we are now going to go into a session that I think is one of the better sessions we do. It's talking about use cases. We've talked about these different solutions from a slightly higher level. How do we actually put them into effect out in the field? And we've got 3 different categories of use cases we're going to cover. We're going to start with general IT, which is going to be Mr. Chris Shannon. You see him on the screen now. Chris is our Vice President of Sales for the Western region. Then we go next, after IT, general IT, we go to HPC, or High Performance Computing. That will be with Mr. Matt Nimesley. And then we're going to wrap it up with David Feller coming back to talk about a use case in media and entertainment. As always, use your question box, and with however much time we have at the end, we'll answer as many of those questions as we can during the event, but we will also answer any question directly if we don't get to cover your question on air. So don't hesitate to send those in. I see the screen moving around quite a bit. The slide we'd want to see now, Chris Shannon, under the use cases would be the presentation mode. And I think he's getting it going there. And we've got it. So Mr. Shannon, are you with us? You may be muted if you're speaking right now.
There we go. Sorry. I thought I was waiting on you. I apologize. So.
It's all you now.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate certainly the opportunity and to come and certainly talk about certainly in my opinion, from being in the sales category and whatnot, how do we help customers? I mean, that's really that's what we're all here for. That's the passion that we bring, and really what we work towards is really trying to figure out by talking to our clients, by talking to our value-added resellers and our alliance partners, what are the challenges that customers are faced with today? So that's what we kind of, I think, wanted to cover today a little bit in this segment, is to share just some real-life scenarios of what we've done out there for clients, and certainly in how we bring solutions to the table that truly help the challenges that they're faced with. And obviously in our neck of the woods, it's how to help them better and more cost effectively manage their secondary storage. So with that, let me start. Let me get to the screen. My apologies. Okay, so first use case that I was kind of assigned to talk to you folks about today is in what we call the general IT space. The general IT space, well, there's a nice picture of me and a couple of the others, but this use case, again, is with a client that's actually now a 9-year client with SpectraLIVE. So you will see that to be fairly common, specifically on the tape side. We obviously, as you've heard already, we do a lot more than tape, but from a tape perspective, we have a lot of folks that have been able to invest in us many, many years ago and continue on with that technology. So this use case specifically is, like I said, in the Gen IT space. This is a 9-year client. This client is actually in the stock exchange holdings and investment sector. So as you could imagine, everybody's data is critical. Everybody's data is very important to them. This one area and this line of business is extremely critical for not only managing their data correctly, but protecting that data, assuring that there's certainly not any bad actors or anything like that out there that can get to their data. Excuse me. So that's the type of client. We are under a little bit of an NDA with them, so I can't really mention their name for some obvious reasons. But I did at least want to let you know what business they're in. They do require long-term retention on most all of their data, as well as very extreme data protection. And I apologize if that, there we go. They certainly required not only long-term retention and the most cost-effective way to do that, but they also certainly that data that they are protecting, that they are keeping around, is extremely critical to their business, and certainly extremely critical to the long-term success of their company. With this client, when we went in 9 years ago, they were a Quantum tape customer and using Veritas Net Backup software at that time. It might have been named something different at that time, actually. But some of the concerns that they had were no local support, really didn't have or didn't see or weren't convinced that these companies could really provide kind of a growth model for them as they were building their business and growing in stature, as well as they really liked where Spectra was going innovation-wise. So that was just some of the things that caused them to do some research and start to look for other solutions. One thing that I do want to certainly stress, and in really keeping the privacy of the client, I kind of also have to keep the privacy of the reseller that helped us with this, but I'm here to tell you, we would be nowhere without our value-added resellers. Certainly, they just bring a component to our business that allows us to get a much farther reach, allows us to add on and bring in value-added technical resources per whatever their expertise is. But bottom line, our VAR community to Spectra, some very more long tenured than others, but as a whole, our VAR community is just extremely strong and extremely important to SpectraLogic. But we owe it to them, really, who we partnered with this client to really bring this solution together. So what is the solution? First of all, just a quick kind of product list of what we provided this client. Starting 9 years ago, they started off with our Spectra T950 tape system or tape library. This product, don't quote me on this, but it has been on the market at least 15 years, if not longer. What they started with was just a basic one Spectra T950. You can kind of read through the stats and whatnot, but this was, again, for their long-term archive and backup. They use worm media, which is write once, read many. It is definitely a level of protection for their data, along with we have encryption as well that can be incorporated. They expanded then because, again, their data continued to grow just like all of our customers, and they expanded to a second T950 in a second data center. They needed some replication from one system to another. They wanted certainly some separation. They wanted DR, so they added a second unit along with their data growth was continuing to grow. So that kept them pretty good for a while, and then they started to acquire more companies. There were some mergers and things of that nature. Their data sets, again, continued to keep growing, and also their locations. They started to become geographically dispersed, and in these two new sites, they incorporated our Black Pearl NAS. For those of you that have been on the live webinar all day today, you've heard about this product. It's just a good, straightforward NAS box, CIFS, NFS, SMB, cheap and deep, expands really, really large, but also very, very cost effective. So on their third site, they decided to put in a NAS, one system at about a half a petabyte, 650 terabytes, and then again acquired another company or had another geographic location, and they decided to implement another Black Pearl NAS in this site. So that's basically 4 sites that SpectraLogic tape and disk secondary storage targets have been implemented and are help protecting their data. One key component here as well is, how does all this run? How do we get all this to certainly help the client manage his data, back up his data, archive his data, all that kind of stuff? And I wanted to give a shout out to our good friends at Commvault. Commvault is a backup software, a data storage management software. We've been partnering with Commvault for years and years and years. And it's basically a 1-2 combo. You need some software to effectively manage the data. You need a target to effectively land that data, and basically married together, you've got Commvault's backup software. So, and again, I want to stress that Commvault is basically managing this entire infrastructure, both tape and disk, from Spectra with their software. So those are the solution components. How does it look? So this is how it looks. This is kind of where it started 9 years ago, give or take. As you can see on the left side there, that's site 1. They started off with one T950 at that site, running Commvault, doing traditional backups, using it for archive as well. And then they wanted a DR site to basically provide ultra-level protection. And so they stood up another T950 in a second site. And again, I don't want to give away locations and stuff like that, given the sensitivity of the client, but the locations are, some miles apart. but in the same state. So this gave them a very, very good DR protection plan for their data, again, running Commvault. As
Hey,
I
Chris,
said in the
Chris,
product
this is
list,
Bob.
yeah,
I just
go
want to
ahead.
jump
Sure.
in real quickly because someone
Sure.
wrote in define DR. So when you're talking about these disaster recovery site, you're talking
Yep.
about some site that if their primary data center is a smoking hole in the ground, as they say, they've got another data center or another area that all their information lives. Is that how you're defining that?
That is the definition to a T, Bob. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
good.
I'm sorry. I get used to using a lot of acronyms and kind of brush over things, but you are correct. That is truly what a disaster recovery site is. In the case of, God forbid, a disaster, you have a second site that can certainly be relied upon for data recovery. So yes, that
Great,
is it.
thanks.
So thanks for clarifying that. So, and then as I said, they grew, their data grew, their locations grew. As I said earlier, they acquired companies, they merged with some companies, and end of the day, their data was growing. And in these other sites, they after some analysis, they figured out they didn't really have the manpower. Not that it takes a ton of manpower to manage a tape library, but they didn't have the manpower, I guess the expertise or whatnot. So they decided in these new sites that they were bringing on board, they would go with disk. Still, again, getting the level of protection that they're looking for, getting the data dispersion, all with the help of Commvault. They added a Site 3. Again, I'm kind of not saying the exact locations, but trust me, these are different locations in another state. That's basically feeding back to the main site, all again with the help and management of Commvault and Spectra Black Pearl NAS. It was a perfect alternative for them. And then lastly, oops, sorry, hit the wrong button. They added a fourth site. Similar requirements, similar constraints when it came to manpower and expertise and things that they were kind of strapped with at these sites, but they needed data protection, they needed data storage. So they, on Site 4, they actually added almost a petabyte of BP NAS, as you heard earlier. This product, again, just a great, solid product if you need a implement or some type of complement to tape, or if you just don't want to use tape, BP NAS is a perfect solution for that, because while it's not as cost effective as tape, tape is still the most cost effective storage medium on the planet. Our disk, Black Pearl NAS, is getting fairly close, still not there, but it's, I don't know, 5 to 7 cents a gig. So great overall solution. And like I said, all kind of managed, all put together, brought together with the help of our great alliance partner, Commvault. So that's really kind of how it draws out, and that's really how the solution was implemented. So lastly, in closing, what were the benefits to the customer if I've not articulated them already for you? As I said, they were experiencing, and still to this day experiencing, significant data growth. Due to acquisition, mergers, obviously just day-to-day activity and the business that they're in, their data is extremely critical to the health of their business, to the health of their clients and whatnot. Also, the T950 allowed them to really move a lot of older data that was basically still using up space and whatnot. It allowed them to archive that off or back that up to a T950, hence basically relieving resources that were being used up on the tier 1 stores that they didn't really need to do. Also, it cost them some expansion costs, or it saved them, it saved them some costs that they were going to incur with having to expand out larger for more computer equipment, obviously more tier 1 storage or whatever. This allowed them to kind of save that expansion growth. Also, as I said, it gave them geographic dispersion. As you've seen, they have 4 sites now. They've got data in all those different 4 sites. Commvault's managing it. They're doing some replication for DR, as we said. So a lot of different variables and flexibility that they have in this solution. Plenty of growth. By the way, the T950s that they've had for 9 years now, all they have to do is continue to upgrade to newer tape technology, add more slots, add more cabinets, and they have massive expansion when it comes to capacity. I mean, it's huge, and it's very, very cost effective, and they own their data. I get it. I understand a lot of people are going to the cloud. We're not here. We're not to bash the cloud. We partner with the cloud. We have cloud solutions. We get it. But if you need your data on-prem, this is a great, great streamlined solution that works really well and saves your customers money. Or if you're a client, will save you money. As I said, we also implemented, we were able to kind of augment their tape infrastructure with some disk backup as well, as you saw in Black Pearl NAS. So it kind of complements that tape infrastructure. And then lastly, they have a complete end-to-end solution from a VAR that has expertise not only in SpectraLogic, but also in Commvault. Great VAR. I wish I could say their name, but good VAR in the Midwest. And they went in and really showed and demonstrated to the client that we've been partnering with Spectra for 20 years. We know their product. We've been partnering with Commvault since they first came out. We know their product. They brought it in, managed it for them, installed it, got it fine-tuned, and it just turned out to be a great solution for the client. So with that, Bob, that's really what I wanted to talk about and certainly share with our audience today on a good basic Gen IT use case. So thanks for your time.
Okay, beautiful. And Chris, if you will just stay with us till the end of this, we're going to save Q&A for the end in the interest of time.
Happy to. Thank you.
Hang around. All right. And if you want, Chris, you can turn off your camera and go about business till we pull you back for Q&A. Next up, we've got Mr. Matt Ninesling. Matt was with us earlier today. He is our Senior Director of Tape Portfolio Management, and he is going to walk us through a use case with high performance computing, or HPC. Matt.
Thanks, Bob. So let's jump into the HPC use case. I'm going to go through and talk about Lawrence Livermore National Labs. They're one of our large HPC users. What does their environment look like? So today, Lawrence Livermore currently has the second largest supercomputer in the world. It's named Sierra. They'll be installing what could be the largest supercomputer at the time in a couple of years. So they're always at the very bleeding edge of HPC. Huge amounts of compute, which then goes into huge amounts of storage and all the other things that go along with it. They're essentially tasked with ensuring the safety, security, and reliability of the nation's nuclear deterrent. That's a pretty heavy task. This is not a place that they can, mess around and lose data or let people on site or anything else. It is a secure site. You don't get to go there unless, you've been vetted. So it makes some of the stuff that you do a little bit more difficult when it comes to like a service standpoint. Today, they create about 30 terabytes of archive data every day. And some days more, some days less, but that's the average over a yearly time period. So their archive increases dramatically over a year. Members of the HPSS collaboration, so they were one of the starting members of the HPS collaboration in the national labs. There's 5 of them. And they're also part of the primary development team. They have over 100 petabytes in their archive. Today, they are actually the file count leader within HPSS, so they have over 2.7 billion files under management. And that's huge. So there aren't that many applications that can really even handle that today. HPSS is one of those. They got their first SpectraLogic tape libraries in late 2018. So they've been a customer for a couple years now, and they've added to that set of libraries over that entire time period. They do have a long history of tape, though. So for their archive environment, they've been using tape for decades. Up until now, they had what a lot of HPC users had, which was they used StorageTek Oracle and T10K, and that was something where now that that's end of life, they've had to go look at what are the other options. What should they do instead of that? Where do they move to? And that's really where they started to work with us at SpectraLogic, and they started to install these Tfinity systems. So what do they have now on site? Their first Tfinity was a 13-frame enterprise TS-based Tfinity. Their second one that went along with that was a 5-frame LTO Tfinity. And so they'd write all their data to TS, and then they write some of their data as a second copy to LTO, and that way they have genetic diversity on different types of media. They then, late last year, installed their third Tfinity, which is a 23-frame enterprise TS-based Tfinity. And that one is, it's a 294 petabyte native capacity library. So that's a very, very large tape system. And it's capable of over 46 gigabytes per second throughput if you're using all the tape drives in it. So huge amounts of functionality here in performance. And then with that one, they also installed a 6-frame LTO-based Tfinity. So what does a 23-frame library look like? And this is a picture of their library. There's a full write-up of this case study both on the SpectraLogic website, and then if you go to the Lawrence Livermore National Lab website, there's also an article there where they show the library and they talk about the system and what their experience has been so far. So this is a almost 20,000 enterprise slots. Like I said, 46 gigabytes a second throughput. Right now it has 128 TS1155 drives in it, and it could go up to 144 TS1155 drives. So just an enormous tape system. And when you talk about HPC and their capabilities that they need in that market, this is kind of what you're looking at. So this is probably, or actually today, this is the largest tape system in the world, this Tfinity that we're looking at right here. So it's pretty cool. They also did custom graphics across the entire library. So that's another thing we do with Tfinity that's pretty unique. And we worked really closely with them. And these graphics kind of show the history of Lawrence Livermore National Lab. So it's something that they actually show off on tours of their data center, and people can see, what's happened with Lawrence Livermore over time, and go look at this enormous tape system that they have running behind some of the biggest HPC systems that are out there. So what were the benefits to Lawrence Livermore by going to Tfinity? It's much denser. So if you compare it to the libraries that they had before now, it takes up much less space in the data center. And that's a huge advantage to them because they're always installing new equipment. They always have new things coming online that they need to fit into the data center environment. It's also a rack row design. So it fits into that standard rack row envelope, where some of the other tape libraries that they've had previously didn't. So now it just matches up with everything else in the data center, and it really fits their environment much better. They also have the option for using T10K drives and media in the Tfinity if they need to. So that's another unique thing to SpectraLogic and to the Tfinity exascale system, is that you can mix LTO, TS, and T10K if you want to. So, as they're doing their migration, if they decide they need to remove older tape libraries off the floor to make space, they could move those tapes and drives into the Tfinity and continue on that migration, even though they don't have the old tape library anymore. And then another thing that we've really focused a lot on with them is we're always trying to make enhancements, try to make the library better for their environment. So as they use it and as they learn more about the Tfinity versus what they had before, we add new features. So we've added a lot of XML features to the library because they needed different types of auditing and different types of interactions with the library to automate some of that stuff. So Bob, if you want to take it over, we can go on to the M&E use case.
Yep, actually what we're going to do now is turn over to Mr. David Feller, and David will have you share your screen and give us the use case from the M&E side. We're almost there.
Almost there. I shared, and unfortunately shared the wrong thing. Let me try that again. Sorry.
That happens.
There we go.
I'm still seeing a blank. Oh, there it goes. Okay, over to you.
I pushed stop. So while I'm messing with that in the background, we are going to take a look at a use case from media and entertainment, just like these other two segments. This one is really interesting, and if you guys, if you guys are taking a look at some of these other market segments, you might be in high-performance computing, you might be in some other market segment, I definitely would encourage you to really pay attention to this, because the media and entertainment folks, again, are leading in the whole cloud space and the conversions that they're doing there. So there's some really interesting things we can learn. So this particular customer happens to have a long-term relationship with us. We've been selling mostly tape libraries to them for some time, and you'll see as we get into what kind of products they have out there that this relationship goes back a long way. But they happen to be a network. It's kind of a post-production house, but they happen to have a pretty tremendous amount of data. as much as some of the large high-performance computing customers that we service. And they have been buying from just about everybody. They're large enough that they've distributed their purchases around and have purchased from just about everybody. So they have, you'll see in a minute, a couple of quantum libraries. They have a relatively large Oracle SL8500 library. And most of the stuff in, for instance, the Oracle library is really old. It goes back to LTO. There's some LTO3, LTO4 tapes in there, actually. They're 100% an LTO house as opposed to using any of the enterprise drives. More recently, they've added a lot of different disk systems, including some of them that we're partnered with, Avid and NetApp and others. They actually use pretty much every software package that's out there. So if you're not in the media and entertainment space, you may not recognize these, but there's two primary ones that really we see everywhere. The Front Porch Digital Diva system, it is a spectacular software package that just does amazing things. But you know, it was designed a long time ago, and there are some customers are trying to decide, do they want to move to something more modern? Similar thing with FlashNet. Again, it's a very good software product, and we have lots of installations with them. We continue to have new installations with both of those, but as you'll see when we talk about Spectra and media and entertainment here in a minute, migration is kind of one of those things. You change vendors sometimes, you look for more modern things, you look for things that may be on a cloud trajectory, and so we come in and we provide those options when those problems are faced by some of our customers. This particular customer uses a large combination of MAMs and editors, but they tend to be Avid centric. And if you're familiar with that, they make both the Media Access Manager software that allows you to categorize and search and find your media, but they also do editing suites and pretty amazing things. We tend to see a lot of Adobe and a lot of Avid. This house happens to be very much Avid. Their goal, and I'll show you a transformation that they went through, not just a sale that we've made, because we've been selling to them for a long time, was to reduce middleware overall, and that middleware, things like the Front Porch Digital stuff and the SGL stuff, to set up a central media repository. So they've got a number of sites worldwide, one main one, and then I think 20 some odd remote sites, each with pretty significant post-production capability. But they essentially want to remove tape. Wait, I'm going to say that again. They want to remove tape in all of those remote locations. And you might be wondering, what are you talking about? You're a tape company, aren't you? Well, that's the point of this whole thing is we certainly provide tape solutions, but we do much more than tape. So we can take on that challenge. So let's take a look at what their system looked like before we really started getting directly involved. You'll notice a smattering of SpectraLogic products around. Their main site, they've got two large quantum libraries, one SL8500. We ended up installing a Tfinity, not in the too distant past. They use a variety, I didn't list them all, but they use a variety of primary storage here. Here's the Avid product up top that does the media access management, and they have a PAM and a MAM, and there's new names for it under Avid, but that's what most people know them by. They're two different kinds of systems. One's for real-time editing, and one's for when I've essentially completed a project, I want to file it for long-term by the actual object name. So they've got two different types of systems, and multiple PAMs, multiple MAMs, actually. And because they've been doing this for so long, they have both Diva and FlashNet for different types of data and different systems. So the goal, and I'll just point out the remote systems. Those are perhaps poorly drawn, and I only drew 4 there of 15, almost 20 sites they have worldwide. In those remote sites, they generally have put in either one of our, I'll say smaller, so single frame to 8 frame libraries, a T950 in I think 4 of the locations, and then T380s or smaller libraries in the more remote ones. But all of them have essentially a fast primary storage, and they're using Diva, the Front Porch Digital product, in each one of those locations. So what are the goals? Kind of down on the bottom left. First was, again, how much of this can we consolidate? Because consolidation is a big thing, cost reduction is a big thing. So first thing was, let's take all of the tapes that are in all of those different libraries and run them in the Tfinity. So moving everything into the Tfinity. They actually set up a second Tfinity as a disaster recovery site like Chris talked to you about. The second goal was, how do we get rid of all the different middleware packages, and they all have different costs associated with them, and they all work differently. So how do we standardize on one thing? And in this particular case, the one thing we standardized on is, in fact, Black Pearl, which you'll see right after lunch. If you come back, we'll tell you about how Black Pearl applies in these particular instances. So they're running a significant amount of Black Pearl just as object storage disk. So that's the primary methodology, is everything gets stored through its S3-like interface to object storage disk. It then replicates out to the Tfinity for long-term storage, and that replicates actually to another Black Pearl at the second site through a RESTful interface. So they have 2 copies in 2 separate locations. So that's the transformation of the main site, and it's pretty dramatic. We have tools that are specific to help people migrate data, both from other legacy middleware products into Black Pearl. We have automatic things. We'll go into all that detail right after lunch. So come back and we'll show you how that works. But then in the remote sites, again, that's a little, you might think that's a little scary for a company like Spectra, but the goal is remove tape from all of those remote locations and put in disk. And the disk actually replaces the Diva and the middleware in all those locations as well. So one appliance replaces tape, replaces the middleware, has a direct interface to Avid, and replicates all back to the main site. So we brought in a Black Pearl at each location, a variety of different ones, some of them down as small as 200 terabytes, all the way up to, I think the largest one was 3 petabytes in one of the larger locations. And they do single copy there, and they do another copy that replicates back to the main site for replication for disaster recovery. So the end result is pretty spectacular, and let's be honest, took years of work to make sure that this all worked well together, and that's what things you can benefit from looking at applications like this. Now, how might I use that for my own application? So what's the upshot of the whole thing? We were able to consolidate all tape into essentially 2 central locations, removing tape essentially from the field. And sometimes in some locations, especially if they're not data centers or not managed, that tape is a little bit harder to maintain than just a simple disk system. So they made that choice. Second one was removal of all legacy middleware, not just from the main site, but actually from all of those locations worldwide, and we handled the migration for them. Single vendor ecosystem. So I think the way that they phrased it is, now I only have one company to blame, but when anything goes wrong, they make one phone call, we fix it. It doesn't matter what it is, we own it all the way through. We've got a great support infrastructure for that. But at the same time, it's industry standard storage. So getting out of that vendor lock-in, you heard it all morning, saving everything on industry standard LTFS. Literally, you can take a tape out of any one of those libraries, put it in a standalone tape drive connected to your computer, and it looks like a USB stick, and you can access your data. Very powerful selling point for a lot of customers. Goal was overall reduction in hardware and software cost, and the big one, full access to all the content regardless of where it resides. If I'm in a remote location, I have access to my local. If it's no longer on that local and it's replicated to tape, the Black Pearl actually takes care of grabbing it for you from that remote location. So they got better accessibility, reduced overall cost, significantly reduced, I might add, when especially compared to the other disk systems, where like 1/5 of the cost is what they reported back to us. And consolidation, so much simpler architecture, much better access, and reduced cost overall. So we're really pleased with this partnership. Bob, I think I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, great job, David. But before we let you go, let me ask you, and you kind of set this up when you first started, even though this is very specific to media and entertainment, there are a lot of different sites that are doing this kind of consolidation, aren't there, and trying to make their information a little bit more accessible. I guess I'm trying to say a little simpler to access via all just the multitude of applications or hardware devices that we've stored up over time. Don't you think this would apply to a lot of the data centers out there that have been around for a while?
Absolutely. In fact, we're seeing a real takeoff of Black Pearl and object store in places that it's kind of new to them. So the big universities, a way to share that data. So a very common thing that's used in that business is Grid FTP or the Globus network. So Globus has a direct tie-in to Black Pearl. So the exact same thing can be done for high-performance computing, for research, for the universities, still using Black Pearl and that RESTful interface that it provides you sharing. I know at the very beginning, one of the questions was, does Spectra support partitioning on the libraries? And absolutely we do, and that's kind of the traditional way to share data and split it up. But now if you add Object Store on top of that, I can have, maybe we have 16 partitions in the library and each has to have its own drives. Well, I can have an unlimited number of buckets that each have their own credentials and each have their own policies that I share to anybody. So it's a good system.
Right. Okay, great. We are going to open it up to questions now if anyone's got any questions or comments. One that came in a little bit earlier, and Chris Shannon, if you were still with us, you might be muted, but this was a question that came up during your presentation. It said, what happened to DR? Doesn't look like the DR site can back up the whole. So I think when you put together that flow chart, you might not have had each bar there together, but did that DR site that you showed, I think it's site number 2 before the others grew up, were all of the sites doing their disaster recovery store back to that single site? Is that the way that was set up?
Yes, it was, and I apologize. I mean, given just the certainly the time allotted and whatnot, I couldn't go into real detail on all the different connectors and whatnot. But yeah, the DR site is really kind of that second site for all of them. And again, the primary site is where most of the bulk of their data is, and truly that DR site is for second copy of all of those different sites. I hope does that answer the question?
It does.
Okay, great.
And another question that came in, and is kind of higher level, along the lines of who is doing this integration. And David, I know you're vice president of solution engineering, so it might be a good question to pose to you. When we go into sites like this, how plug and play is it? How much do you get support from SpectraLogic? What would you say about that?
Black Pearl integrations that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it was the integrations. I'm not sure which one it came up during, but it was just, and it might have even been yours. A lot of consolidation. It's who's making the calls on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a section actually in the media entertainment right after lunch. I'm prodding everybody to come back because there's some really good stuff in there, where we go through what some of those partnerships are, and we're actually going to show and announce I think 5 brand new ones right after lunch that will directly affect the way that you do business. Meaning the breadth of software packages that already integrate with Black Pearl is growing dramatically to the point where it used to be, if we go back just 2 years, it was, well, how do we convince that software company to do this integration? And it's almost rare now that we walk into a company and they show us the workflow and we start writing down, what all of the software packages they use. And we go, yep, that has a Black Pearl interface. Yep, they've already done that one. Yep, it's done. It is very common now, and I would encourage you to go take a look on the website. So it's not very hard. We also have quite a few companies that are doing their own. We offer free tools. We offer a command line interface. We offer a drag and drop that's kind of like FileZilla that lets you get things into the object storage world. You can script it. We have some companies that actually wrote their own. There's a media entertainment company in the UK that actually stores all of their proxies on Dropbox. We talked about the cloud earlier and how to use it. And that's what they use, is the corporate MAM, essentially. And all of those have links to a Black Pearl. So you just click the link and it brings the main product, the main media back to you. So lots of options.
So I take it that the SpectraLogic solution architects can help bring all of that together as far as the different players or the different pieces, or understanding what people already have in place that we're trying to make sure that we fit in with.
Yeah, and that's what we love doing, frankly. Yeah, we can go in and give you a product pitch and tell you all the details. We do a lot of that on the webinars. What we love doing is we come in and just dump on us. Tell us what your problems are, what your workflow looks like, what's your goal, what are you trying to get to, and we've got a really unique bag of tricks we can pull up. Certainly our products, sometimes competitive products, sometimes software packages. It just helps having a a friendly person that can come in and share with you what other people in your industry are doing, and that's a big part of our job.
Great. Last comment that came in, and I guess anyone can probably feel this, but talking about the DR site that we were talking about that had been taken over those other sites over time, the comment is so the DR site has grown tremendously, ? And it has. And I guess anyone who's going to be doing DR is going to have to anticipate that kind of growth. What would you say about, and I know we've touched here and there on expandability with different point products, but what would you say about thinking of that ahead of time, David, if you were configuring something that, the future expansion?
Yeah, you bet. If you go back just not too long ago, the concept of DR, disaster recovery, was, we tend to separate business continuity, meaning short-term business continuity, like we talked about it earlier. The virus hits us. How do we have business continuity over the next 24 hours to things fall completely apart and we need to completely recover from a true disaster? And they're slightly different things, and access models. The longer term one used to be literally people would come pick up tapes in a truck and take them off to a remote location. Works great and is very there's nothing more protected, against ice age even, but it takes a while. It could take a week to recover and get everything back by the time you get it all shipped. So we're now looking at disaster recovery that's connected but still offline through things like protected RESTful interfaces, and really happy about. Honestly, as a storage company, what I would really like is if everybody had 12 disaster recovery sites, all with Spectra equipment, but that's really not reasonable. Consolidation into a single one is really what's happening.
Right. Okay, great. That's it for the questions and comments.